I'm the one who brings heat into your home.
I am the one who helps keep the lights on.
I know my community like the back of my hand.
I am here for you
when you need me the most.
I'm helping our customers become more energy efficient.
I am driving the change.
I put the customer first.
I am creating customer value.
I am the best customer service representative around.
I am proud of my team.
I am inclusion.
I am building a safety culture.
I enable supervisors
so my team can lead.
I
seize opportunities.
I am a change maker.
I am continuous improvement.
I am growth.
I am supporting
the clean energy transition.
Delivering new technology
at the forefront of change.
Giving back to our communities.
I am building the future.
I am
clean energy.
I am
bringing clean energy choices to customers.
I'm bringing energy to life.
I bring energy to life.
I am bringing energy to life.
I'm bringing energy to life.
I am National Grid.
I am National Grid.
I am National Grid.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carlo Chisora, President and CEO of the New York Building Congress. We are certainly living in unprecedented times in our city, our state, our nation. We thought that the COVID pandemic was something that we were going to remember this year. Unfortunately, we are also remembering the tragic murder of an African-American man for no reason. And I think that all of us in our industry and in every industry must come together to rebuild not just storefronts, but to rebuild lives, to rebuild trust, to rebuild opportunities for all people in our country, particularly Black Americans. And that is a commitment that we must all share. Learning through this process and these crazy times, the Building Congress Innovation and Best Practices Council has determined that obviously an in-person Ascend conference just could not happen. We are learning new things. We're learning how to work remotely and what that means. We're learning how to educate our children remotely and how that affects their lives. We're learning how to take care of our parents and grandparents under these stressful times. We've seen how this epidemic, how this terrible time in our country has affected every aspect of our lives. And it's a moment when technology plays a great role in bringing us forward. So for this year, our Ascent Conference will be remote. But when you think of it, a Council on Innovation and Best Practices clearly should be creating and trying new things and learning about how it affects our industry. I'm very proud of the work the building industry does across the country, particularly here in New York. I'm very proud that our co-chairs are leading our efforts in creating a virtual innovation conference this year that will bring together some great ideas, some new concepts, and really help us learn how do we get through a crisis like this through innovation, technology, and best practices. I do want to thank our 4 co-chairs for leading this effort. Tom Scarangello from Thornton Tomasetti, Carl Galiotto from HOK, Charlie Murphy from Turner Construction, and Jill Lerner from KPF. We've got some exciting times ahead. We have some wonderful programming, and we're excited to be in this together. Thank you, everyone.
With the Virtual Ascend programs, we will take a look at the issues affecting the industry, how we move forward post-pandemic, and how we prepare for future crises. To kick off Ascend 2020, we are sharing a pre-recorded video from earlier this May of a panel discussion titled Ingenuity Now, How Do We Prepare for When It's Over, from the recent Thornton Tomasetti annual meeting. At that meeting, we brought together thought leaders to discuss how the building industry needs to reimagine how we design, build, and occupy space to adapt to a new way of living and working. On behalf of all of my co-chairs, we recognize the nature of more recent events demand that we must also think innovatively and implement real solutions to create safe and healthy and equitable environments for the well-being of all, especially our historically underserved communities.
In 2014, the Building Congress formed the Council on Innovation and Best Practices.
Its charge was to identify, evaluate, and offer recommendations and best practices throughout the building industry with the goal of improving how New York City's built environment is designed and constructed. The Council's Building Innovation Report in 2016 offered practical deliverables related to building technology and project delivery, government procurement and procedures, workforce development, product and process innovation, site management, and stakeholder communication. Building upon these recommendations, the Council planned the Ascend Conference, a thought leadership event designed to further the Building Congress as a leading convener in New York City's innovation ecosystem. Differentiating the event among other conferences, the object was to prioritize best-in-class content focused on the future of building innovation and develop tangible actions and applications that could drive the organization's advocacy efforts for the future.
Last year's inaugural Ascend Conference provided an opportunity for frank discussion about ways to drive real change for the future. In addition to highlighting the regulatory roadblocks that are faced by those in the industry, the program also took a critical look inward. The slow and costly nature of construction has as much to do with the burdensome government regulations as it does with the unwillingness to change long-established habits. As we all know, the construction has notoriously lagged behind other industries when adopting technology and innovation, and is slow to change. We believe that the current circumstances are providing a unique opportunity to reassess the implementation of technology and adopting best practices to propel the industry into a new era of innovation and change. To do so, we have to challenge the way we think and do business, engage the next generation of industry leaders, and encourage them to challenge the status quo, embrace the best practices from around the world, and dare to think differently.
As others have mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic has vastly changed our lives and will have a lasting impact on how we work, how we live, how we socialize, and how we usher in global change. The world is going to need to look to us, to architects, engineers, contractors, and the other vital sectors of our industry to create and design our new normal and to make it a reality. And in doing so, I hope we will strive to create a more conscious, sustainable, safe, and equitable way of life for all. Office space will be readapted, hospitality will undergo sweeping changes, and every sector of the building environment will be affected. But we will also have greater opportunity to alter the landscape of our urban centers, their suburban surroundings, and our rural communities, not only in New York, but across the country and the world. Now is also the time to invest in safe infrastructure and to see work on these critical projects as a way to stimulate the economy, aid in its recovery, and result in a safe and productive work environment. In conclusion, I would like to say that we all look forward to sharing these ideas that will drive the design and construction industry over future years. And we hope you will join us in this webinar series over the coming months.
So I wanted to kick off by asking each of the panelists in turn to name one permanent or semi-permanent change they see coming out of this. And I think there are the things that we all know about, working at home and greater concern with hygiene and security and so on. But what do you think is the most important trend that will be with us after this is all over, that will change the world, that you'd like to put forward? So Marianne, could I start with you, please?
Sure, it's great to be here with all of you. I think one of the most seismic changes that we'll see is the building of well buildings, and this idea that in a city like New York, where the average age of the office stock approaches 70 years, that rehabilitating sick buildings and transforming them or renovating them where they're still sick buildings versus investing in well buildings is going to become super important. And it's something we have begun to talk about in New York, but we're really behind many other global cities in thinking about buildings as giant motherboards or giant smartboards. And I think with technology available, we can put healthier buildings online, and it will be a requirement because people want to be inside healthy buildings now more than ever, and certainly post-COVID. So I think it begins with the mechanical systems in the buildings. I think it's a lagger in our industry where it's not as sophisticated, particularly here in New York, and really needs to up our game. So I'm looking forward to a sort of a transformation on the way that we look at well buildings, and that they become essential for the built environment going forward.
Thank you, Marianne. I was speaking to an Asian electronics supplier the other day that is rubbing their hands at the opportunities for measuring all sorts of pollutants and air quality measures in buildings. It's been a sort of a fringe industry for a while, but now comes mainstream because we need those sensors and to meet the concerns about building qualities and safety. So I think that's interesting. Rosemary, what do you see as being one of the most profound changes that will reshape this industry, that is here to stay? It's not just a temporary, lockdown-induced effect.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Just to build, no pun intended, on what Marianne was saying, I think for the AEC industry, this is really going to shine a spotlight on openness and transparency, and the sometimes lack of openness and transparency. It's really bringing forward the importance in being able to measure what matters, especially coming from a construction background. We can't fake digitization anymore. We can't hide behind this argument that we are traditionally not very productive, and these are all the reasons why we need to evolve, and we need to evolve very quickly in this environment. And I think that by acknowledging the impacts of COVID, it's going to really bring these arguments and these issues to the forefront, especially in the area of mechanical and electrical, and especially during the pre-construction phase. And I think we'll be, forced to acknowledge the shortcomings of our industry, but I also think it presents a tremendous opportunity for the industry that if we are forward-thinking and not reactionary, we should all be able to capitalize upon.
Right, so you see it as an accelerator of change in the industry then, both the necessity and the opportunity of technological catch-up and innovation. Interesting. Kai, as coming from an architecture firm, I mean, what are your thoughts on what may change here? Might the whole conception of an office and how we use an office change, or what do you see as being some of the profound changes that we need to imagine and reimagine here?
I would like to think that actually creating flexibility within projects, one of the profound things that I feel and I'm seeing is that buildings that we build for one program can actually take on entirely new programs in times of need. And the idea of resiliency is something that it's a term that's often used sort of in terms of economics, in terms of climate, but I think there's also a resiliency in terms of use, and that you could actually start to imagine a city with all of these needs at times of need to be able to suddenly occupy and suddenly see a hotel turn into a hospital, suddenly see our parking lots turning into testing centers. And I think that if we actually imagine these needs, because even in my lifetime, I've seen it now 5, 6, 7 times, we can actually start to think very creatively about how to create that sort of redundant resiliency within a city that I think will be and benefit the city as a whole.
Okay, could I just probe a little further on that? So I hear the resiliency, the nuance of alternative uses. The fact that we, people are celebrating the fact that the Chinese built a massive hospital, one of the biggest hospitals in the world, in whatever it was, a week. But you're saying, well, actually, you don't need to do that. You can repurpose other buildings. You can actually have multi-purpose buildings. Are there other dimensions of resiliency that you can associate with the building profession?
Yeah, I do think that it's funny how a bicycle path is seen as something that is a nice to have that maybe takes care of less than 5% of the traffic or movement of people, and suddenly a bicycle path actually starts to become integral and necessary and fundamental to actually moving people around when public transportation no longer is an option or is less of an option. And I think that we should be seeing these things for what they are at different times of our lives. Also, as we age, we move slower, or we have to think about different generations. Even something as simple as snow removal, when we dictate that snow removal is for cars and less so for people, we are actually stating the value system of our society. If we start to clean the sidewalks before the streets, we are then again stating what the value system is to our society. So I think there are sort of some value systems that we need to sort of consider, and how they may start to shift and start to sort of refocus our cities and our needs.
Thank you. Jesse, maybe from a financial perspective, investment perspective, how's this going to change? How's this crisis going to change the equation semi-permanently? Are we going to be making the same sorts of investments or less, or with a different philosophy?
Well, I think one thing that underpins a lot of this, and it underpins the future of investments, is the appreciation for agility. We had all this discussion we were just having is really based upon the ability to execute what we've just described is based upon access to data, which is available through integrated systems. I think from even working with some of our investors, I've certainly learned those who are most confident have integrated systems, are very confident in their data, therefore are very secure about completing their project pipeline and have confidence about pursuit for new projects. So whether you're on defense or you're shifting to offense, I think information is going to prove to be king here going forward. And the other thing I would add to this is that there are technologies that have been sort of ready and waiting to be applied, and this moment could be what pulls the future forward when it comes to things like augmented and virtual reality, reality capture on construction sites, construction techniques around prefab and modular. These are notions, technologies, things that have been really, in some ways, waiting for their moment, and they now may be pulled forward.
Thank you, Jesse. Tom, what do you see as being some of the profound permanent changes we should be preparing for?
Well, I'll pick up on a couple that's been mentioned. One's been mentioned. I do believe this idea of the digitalization of the full life cycle of the building world. If you think about, we have the tools to design, to construct, and to actually manage buildings in a fully digital world. And every time we get involved in projects, there's always a reason why not to deliver that fully digital solution. And now suddenly we're sitting there saying, wouldn't it be great to have in a construction site so you can have less density and have people inspect remotely? Wouldn't it be great to have an existing building, a digital twin of that building, so you can put in sensors and not have to figure out what's in that building that was built 5 years ago? So I think all of those barriers to accepting the technology that exists and bringing it in all the way through the life cycle are there. And the other thing I'd say is I actually think that way we're going to deal with health in offices is going to change. I grew up in a generation where going to work, you played hurt. My old partner, Charlie Thornton, used to just, if you didn't come in and if you were a little bit under the weather, it was a sign of some kind of honor to come in while you weren't feeling well or weren't doing well. And I think what we've seen in this is that actually we can have a much healthier work environment. Forget about just airflow through it and more light. Just not have people come in when they're not feeling well. And I think that cultural change, forget about not shaking hands. I think just saying there will be no pride in coming to work, feeling under the weather. I think everybody will see that differently going forward.
And Tom, if I could say, even the way that we work, I think that this is so obvious, but building homes and office buildings in a city like New York, the way that we design homes in New York now, apartments, it's not necessarily been top of mind that developers build apartment buildings for people with the idea that they could spend 50% of their work life at home. And I think the way that we design living spaces, as well as how we design office spaces, are going to fundamentally shift. And I don't think it's about pre-vaccine, post-vaccine. I think if you talk to architects around the city, I spend a lot of time speaking to architects about how has it been since there's been this shift of working remotely. And I think that there's a recognition that 50% of what an architect does is alone time. and Kai, you can talk to this, right? Where you go through an architect's office and everybody has their earbuds in, and that work is happening at home. And what the architects are talking about wanting to do is to transform their office space into places of gathering, whether it's places to break bread or to commune or to have a drink or to collaborate. But they actually think that there could be a model where 50% of the week folks are home, and the other 50% they're coming into the office, but there aren't offices. They're coming in to engage, deeply engage, maybe